Here we are at the I-820 I-35 West interchange in Fort Worth, Texas. These highway intersections not only serve as cornerstones of the local economy, but also are marvels of engineering by themselves. While these highways do serve as connection centers throughout our nation, they also contribute to the threat of climate change through their construction, maintenance, and usage. Hi, my name is Cooper Collins, and if I was a newly elected member of Congress, I would make it my first priority to reform America's transportation networks in order to help fight climate change. First, how did America adopt the automobile? Well, in 1956, the Eisenhower administration signed into law the Federal Highway Aid Act. This bill created the modern interstate system that we still use to this day. These highways fundamentally changed the way Americans lived and worked. On the outer ring of many American cities, a suburb was created. These suburbs were spread out and cheap, but most importantly, car dependent. By 1965, 55% of Americans with incomes over $10,000 a year became suburbanites. And with the rise of expansive highways and low-density suburbs that created a huge physical gap between commuters' homes and their workplaces, the need for car ownership increased as well. In 1950, there were 25 million registered cars, and by 1958, there were 67 million registered cars. By the 1970s, cars became the dominant method of personal transportation. And as the federal government prioritized highways and automobiles more and more, the nation's supply chains also fell victim to this new wave of car-centric planning. America's freight was being moved more and more around by trucks, which was assisted by the federal government's creation of the interstate system. Today, over 70% of America's freight is moved by trucks. This historic revolution of transportation, however, does not come without its downsides, which we will discuss in the next section. A lot has changed since the 1970s. Environmental issues are talked about more than ever, with the discussion of climate change at the forefront. In 2020, the EPA reported that 27% of all U.S. greenhouse gases come from transportation, the biggest source of CO2 emissions in the country. This is caused by America's overdependence on the automobile. For example, the U.S. Energy Information Administration estimates that in 2021, U.S. motor gasoline and diesel fuel consumption in the U.S. transportation sector resulted in the emission of about 1,018 million metric tons of carbon dioxide. In order for the United States to fight climate change, we need to transform our transportation networks to be more carbon neutral. In order to meet this need in carbon neutral transportation, many car manufacturing companies have created their own lines of electric cars. However, according to Florian Knobloch from the Cambridge Center for Environment, Energy, and Natural Resource Governance, producing electric vehicles leads to significantly more emissions than producing petrol cars, which is mostly from the battery production.
While I do think that EVs have a potential to shift the current pollutions and impacts of our transportation system, I do not think that they are a solution in and of themselves alone. We really need to start looking at other modes of transportation that don't require the same level of energy, such as walking and biking and public transit, which are proven to have a much bigger impact on reducing our carbon footprint.
This is Professor Lauren Fischer. She teaches urban studies at the University of North Texas. So not only is the manufacturing of any type of car terrible for the environment, but the infrastructure they use as well.
Flow through of those environmental impacts. Air pollution produces asthma and human health impacts that we know are cumulative and that we know hurt certain populations and particular can create sort of lifelong health problems for children who are exposed at an early age.
According to the Sightline Institute, constructing 1 lane mile of highway and maintaining it for 50 years produces roughly 3,500 tons of CO2. This begs the question, what form of transportation could we use to solve the issue? Well, I propose an old but tested way of transit. Trains. Trains emit far less CO2 than cars, trucks, or even highways. According to the International Union of Railways, quote, the carbon footprint of high-speed rail, including operation, track construction, and rolling stock construction, is about 14 to 16 times less than transport by private car or airplane. With this information, the choice is clear when it comes to which form of transportation is the most environmentally friendly. But how do we change America's transportation networks to be more oriented around trains? When it comes to passenger rail, a lot of local, state, and even interstate public transit agencies need one main thing: money. Local Texas agencies like DART, Dallas Area Rapid Transit, historically suffer from financial shortfalls, which inhibits these agencies' abilities to expand local transit projects. So Congress will need to pass a huge spending bill in order to help fund local transit agencies and Amtrak. We can divert some federal spending from highways and airline subsidies and use that on a comprehensive spending bill. Congress will also have to negotiate with Class 1 freight rail companies to allow for both local expansion and national expansion of transit routes. Congress can also cut subsidies to freight transporting airlines and trucking companies in order to encourage more usage of freight trains. It can also be used to construct new lines and give much needed upgrades to pre-existing tracks. Of course, these changes will not be easy to implement. People will have to be educated on the advantages and rewards for utilizing rail transit in a more substantial way. This is why I would prioritize rail transit if I was elected to Congress, not only to bring practical reforms, but also start these conversations with the American people. I'm Cooper Collins. Thank you for watching.